Man that literally made it rain still has scientists baffled. Some people hate rain. It can, after all, leave you uncomfortable in cold and wet clothing. Others, though, find the beautiful pitter-patter of drops on their windowsill relaxing. The one thing people can agree on is that water falling from the sky is an inevitable and uncontrollable act of nature, not something that can be manipulated by people. Three men tried anyway, but it wasn't until Charles Hatfield tried to make it rain that people believed it possible. This process would prove far more twisted than anyone imagined. It left many wondering if toying with nature was worth the cost. The late 1800s were a weird time. America was coming out of the Industrial Revolution, and there were a lot of crazy ideas floating around. However, from today's perspective, people simply didn't know that much, like about how things work. One particularly odd phenomenon was the emergence of pluviculturalists, people who wanted to change the weather, specifically by inducing rain, and believed it was within their capabilities to do just that. One man in particular, James Pollard Espy, came along with a very interesting idea as to how he could go about achieving this awe-inspiring act. Espy was convinced that heat rushing up into the air was what created rain, and this led him to the conclusion that there was only one thing to do. His plan was so outrageous that people were disturbed. Yes, Espy believed that in order to create rain, people had to begin intentionally starting huge forest fires. Needless to say, others had the good sense to tell Espy this was actually not a good idea, and the plan fell through. Soon, Edward Powers came along, and he believed that, rather than heat, it was actually a good battle that resulted in rain, like full-on military conflict. This caught the government's attention, and officials set out to test his theory. So Congress funded a series of fake military battles in order to see if the fighting really could be correlated to an uptick in soggy days. The results were mixed, to say the least. The battles sometimes worked. Rain did follow one of the simulated effects, but this was on a day when conditions were already likely to produce rain. Not exactly a clean scientific experiment. Then, finally, Charles Hatfield came along. He would be the one who would be able to change everything, completely turning the whole field of pluviculture on its head. Hatfield spent his days working as a salesman at the New Home Sewing Machine Company, but he had designs for something bigger. He was dead set on being the first ever person to literally make it rain. His idea was to create a chemical combination that would then release into the air from a high tower, thus inducing rainfall. By 1902, he believed he'd perfected his 23 chemical mix and was ready to get to work. He and his brother Paul approached a group of ranchers and made them an offer they couldn't possibly refuse. For only $50, he promised to make it rain on their pastures. So the Hatfield brothers got straight to work, building their first ever evaporating tower. Once it was finished, they would climb to the top and release the chemical elixir Charles had banked so much on. Finally, the day came when they released the mixture. They held their breaths in anxious anticipation and waited for what they hoped and prayed would be a torrential downpour. What they witnessed truly outdid their wildest expectations. Rain came in droves, drenching the grass and making the soil fertile again. There was one slight catch, though. Coincidentally, the Contemporary Weather Bureau had reported that rain was already expected for that day, and the droplets Hatfield witnessed were merely part of a larger storm. This didn't upset the ranchers, however. They paid him double. Then in 1915, the city of San Diego was in desperate need of pluviculturalists. Not because of drought, for there had been more rain than average that season. The city needed to accommodate the needs of its rapidly expanding population. Charles was just the man for the job. He quieted the concerns of local officials, promising to bring rain to the city by the end of the next year. Of course, his services didn't come cheap. The government promised to pay him $10,000 or $250,000 in today's money. So Charles Hatfield again got to work building his tower and releasing his mysterious chemical mix. Again, he waited for results, and suddenly, sooner than anyone could have predicted, they came. However, this time people would not be left smiling. Joyously, on January 14th, 1916, it began to rain. Hatfield sighed with relief, and the citizens of San Diego rejoiced. However, soon they were all in for a sinister surprise. At first, the rain provided a welcome respite. People sat back and enjoyed it for a couple of days. But then they realized something was terribly wrong. The rain had started, but it wouldn't stop. The public began to develop a growing sense of dread. After 3 days, when the terrifying monsoons had still not relented, insane floods raged through the city, and the dam itself had overflowed, causing unbelievable levels of damage and chaos. The raging waters destroyed anything that crossed their path, including train tracks, telephone poles, homes, and even bridges. This left San Diego almost completely cut off from the outside world. Far worse even than the destruction of infrastructure were the tragic fatalities that resulted from Hatfield's plan. Anywhere from 15 to 50 people died amidst the chaos. What Hatfield did next shocked people. Despite all the misery and loss that had resulted from Hatfield's genius idea, he still expected payment. After all, he had followed through on what was asked of him. Unsurprisingly, the city didn't respond very kindly to this. However, San Diego officials conceded that they would indeed pay him if he agreed to take responsibility for the overflowing of the dam. This was all in an effort to protect themselves from being sued by people affected by the incident.
Thank you for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to get notified of all our new videos.